Welcome to the regular meeting of the Public Health and Safety Committee for February 5th, 2025. I am Jason Chavez, and I am the chair of this committee. Before we begin the meeting, I want to offer a friendly reminder to all members, staff, and the public that these meetings are broadcast live to enable greater public participation. These broadcasts include real-time captioning as a further method to increase the accessibility of our proceedings to the community. Therefore, all speakers need to be mindful of the rate of their speech so that our captioners can fully capture and transcribe all comments for the broadcast. We ask all speakers to moderate the speed and clarity of their comments. At this time, I will ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify the presence of a quorum for this meeting.
Councilmember Payne.
Present.
Rainville.
Present.
Ellison is absent. Palmisano.
Present.
Vice Chair Walmsley is absent. Chair Chavez.
Present.
There are 4 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. With that, the agenda for today's meeting is before us. There are 8 items in today's consent agenda and 1 item recommended for postponement. Item number 1 is accepting additional grant funds for the Minnesota Department of Health for the Public Health Response Sustainability Grant. Item number 2 is authorizing a memorandum of understanding between the Department of Veteran Affairs and the Police Department for interagency coordination. Item number 3 is authorizing a memorandum of understanding between Augsburg University and the Police Department. Item number 4 is authorizing a contract with the Minnesota Recovery Connection to implement the Public Health Regenerative Leadership Synergy Grant. Item number 5 is a contract with City Match for the work on the Healthy Families Community-Based Health Initiative. And item number 6 is directing staff to research autonomous food delivery technology and its impact on workers. Item number 7 is approving a legislative directive related to information about the administration's 2025 Summer Safety Plan. Item number 8 is referring to staff the amended subject matter introduction of an ordinance related to civil rights. Additionally, item number 9 is postponing to the February 19th meeting consideration of a resolution urging the administration to adopt the Safe and Thriving Communities Report and plan for public safety beyond policing. Members, are there any discussions on these items? All right. I'll move approval of item 1 through 8, including the postponement of item number 9. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? That carries and the consent agenda is approved. The next item is our first discussion item is receiving and filing a report about the 5-year racial and ethnic approaches to community health grants. Here to present on this item is Jenny from the Health Department. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you see the slides? Excellent. All right. Well, good afternoon, Chair Chavez, council members. I'm Jenny Mines, and I'm the manager of the Healthy Living Initiative and the project director for the REACH program. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Louisa, and other members of the health department. And we're here to share updates on the Racial and Ethnic Approaches to Community Health, or REACH program, including accomplishments from the first year, as well as efforts underway during the second. So REACH is a CDC-funded program that has been around for over 25 years, and the Minneapolis Health Department won a 5-year competitive grant in 2023, and we're just a few months into the second year of implementation. The work is led by 2 teams in the health department. My team manages the chronic disease prevention portion, and Louisa's team manages the adult vaccination portion. The overall goal of REACH is to improve health outcomes among populations that experience the worst health disparities. And so in Minneapolis, we're focusing on Black, African American, and East African, as well as Native American communities, because they experience stark health disparities for both chronic diseases and vaccination rates. The way this program works is that the CDC selected proven public health strategies, and our health department is putting 4 of them into action by adapting them to meet the Minneapolis needs. So over 5 years, we're working to improve nutrition by increasing access to affordable, healthy foods like fruits and veggies, increase physical activity by creating safe and accessible places to move, increase breastfeeding by improving lactation support for pregnant and postpartum families, and increasing vaccinations by promoting and providing COVID, flu, and other vaccinations. So you can see our budget over time here. We were awarded the grant in September of 2023, and at the time anticipated the annual funding amount to be consistent over 5 years. In year one, we received a little over $1,021,000. And then in year two, there was a 12% decrease, and we received about $902,000. So about 70 to 75% of our overall budget is dedicated to the chronic disease prevention strategies I just mentioned, and about 25 to 30% is allocated for the vaccination work. As I've noted here, years 3, 4, and 5 are a little uncertain. We typically get our funding announcement and our budget from the CDC in September, but we do anticipate further reductions in the vaccination area. So REACH is super important for the health department because it currently funds about 6 full-time staff positions, and it also directly funds community contractors and partners. In year one, we awarded 13 organizations a little bit over $341,000 to help us meet our goals. So the first chronic disease prevention strategy is nutrition. And here our goal is to increase access to affordable, healthy foods like fruits and veggies. We have 3 projects under this strategy. They are food service guidelines, fruit and veggie voucher programs, and produce prescriptions. So food service guidelines really set the standard for food, beverages, and food operations like a cafeteria that happen in an organizational setting. And so we're working with 6 area hospitals to improve the food that is served for patients, staff, and visitors, with an emphasis on culturally relevant menus in the first couple of years. Collectively, these 6 hospitals serve more than 12,000 meals each day. And so what's on the menu really matters. And by 2028, we aim to change the guidelines for at least 2 of the hospitals that are working with us. Fruit and veggie voucher programs. In Minnesota, we're fortunate to have programs like Market Bucks and the Farmers Market Nutrition Program that do provide free fruits and veggies for low-income shoppers, specifically who are shopping at farmers markets. And with REACH, we're working to increase the number of places that accept these voucher programs, as well as the number of vouchers that are redeemed by people using them. And so in year one, we delivered a food resource navigator training series as a first step. Staff at 8 community health clinics and other health systems participated. And in this training, the navigators learn more about the voucher programs and, more importantly, how to connect people to these programs as well as to other food resources. And so in the second year, we're shifting our focus a little bit to focus on how to increase the number of farmers market vendors, like the stalls at the market, that are going to accept the vouchers. Finally, produce prescriptions. You may have heard about these. They are an effective way to get fruits and vegetables to people who are experiencing food insecurity, as well as a chronic health condition like diabetes. And through REACH, we're happy to be partnering with the Native American Community Clinic, who screens patients and refers them to another partner, Brightside Produce. And Brightside delivers bags of this fresh produce directly to patients' homes, which is pretty cool. So to date, more than 184 patients have participated in the program. And over the next 5 years, we hope to not only sustain the program at the Native American Community Clinic, but ideally expand it to 5 other clinics or hospitals in Minneapolis. So quick spotlight on the Nutrition Food Resource Navigator training program. Again, the navigators are really connecting low-income households with fruits and veggie vouchers and other food resources. And so I mentioned the trainings that we offered for all of the clinic and hospital staff, but we're especially excited to be partnering directly with Fairview Health Services to support a staff position at the Riverside Clinic in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood. You can meet Kate. Her picture is on the slide here. She's a registered dietitian who has had 103 patient consultations and made 161 referrals to programs like the voucher ones that I explained earlier. All right. So physical activity is that strategy again is where we're creating safe and healthy environments for people to be active. And here we're working on three location-based projects around the city. One is the Little Earth neighborhood in South Minneapolis. And in North Minneapolis, we're working on the North Side Greenway with Public Works, as well as with the Lopet Foundation and the Willard, Hay, and Near North neighborhoods that are really adjacent to Theodore Wirth Regional Park and the Trailhead. So for all three of these, it requires a really close coordination with City Public Works as well as Minneapolis Park and Rec Department. And by 2028, we really want to make some of these design changes or policy or plan changes to streets, parks, and trails in these neighborhoods. And again, the changes are supposed to improve pedestrian safety by, for example, slowing down traffic on streets, to incorporate community representation like art into the streets and parks, and to ideally make it just easier and fun for folks who live there to walk, bike, play, and just kind of be active outside. So in the Little Earth neighborhood, we're working with Little Earth Residents Association, and they have chosen to focus on installing temporary wayfinding signs as well as street painting that reflect Indigenous culture, improve pedestrian safety, slow down traffic, and inform a future street reconstruction, which is part of the capital improvement program or plan. In North Minneapolis, the health department has actually worked with Public Works on the North Side Greenway for over a decade, so this is exciting to see some of it come to fruition. And last year, REACH supported by providing some additional public engagement with the Cultural Wellness Center, a well-known community-based organization. And so Cultural Wellness Center did some door knocking and provided a couple community bike rides along the route so folks could get involved, and that engagement is informing the final design that Public Works is working on. And third, in the Willard, Hay, and Near North neighborhoods in North Minneapolis, we're working with the Lopet Foundation. They operate the space and the programs at the Trailhead, which is a kind of a destination within the park that's right there. And so with REACH, the goal is to increase the utilization of the park and the programs by the neighbors, and also to identify changes to the space that might make it more appealing. And so last year, we supported some outdoor programming, a survey with participants, and this year the Lopet is really interested in building closer connections with Northside community organizations. Okay. Quick spotlight. So an example of this physical activity work. Hopefully these photos bring it to life a little bit more. And again, this is one way that we're trying to create safe and accessible spaces for people to move around Little Earth. The design changes here are going to hopefully slow down cars, increase pedestrian comfort and safety, and just make the streets more welcoming and encourage activity. So we're super excited to be working with the Native Youth Arts Collective. They are a program that's within the Little Earth Residents Association group of programs, and they run 2 youth training programs where youth artists as well as like lead adult artists are going to design and install some signs and murals. The goal is to install up to 10 signs around the housing complex in particular, and then they are also proposing a refresh of some of the existing street murals that are there and were done back in 2020, and some new murals that might go on 18th Avenue South and Ogama Place. And for this, we are working, of course, through the city's public art permit application process. And just to note that these designs are not final, but they are courtesy of the Native Youth Arts Collective artists, and we love their work. So finally, breastfeeding is our third strategy for chronic disease prevention, and it's a unique one because it has health benefits for both babies and the lactating parent. And so the goal is to improve support for pregnant and postpartum families. So healthcare providers, clinics, hospitals, they all play a really important role in supporting families and meeting their lactation goals. And through REACH, we have 2 projects that support lactation in healthcare specifically. One is a training program, and the second is lactation-friendly clinics. So on the first one, to train healthcare workers to offer a culturally tailored lactation support, we're working with Cultural Wellness Center again and the Division of Indian Work, who are experts with their communities, and together we're adapting an existing curriculum and then inviting staff from the 8 community clinics and area hospitals to participate. The second project is developing a lactation-friendly clinic program, and this is an opportunity for clinics to be celebrated and recognized for adopting organizational policies or practices that better support lactation, not only for patients, but for employees who work there. And for that, we're working with the Minnesota Department of Health, the American Heart Association, and overall aiming to train, at least 35 healthcare staff and establish 5 lactation-friendly clinics over the 5 years. So a little bit more to spotlight kind of what we're trying to do with the lactation-friendly clinics. This program is still in the design phase, but it is modeled after existing successful state and federal programs. You may have heard of breastfeeding-friendly hospital designation or breastfeeding-friendly health departments and work sites. And so currently, there is actually not a statewide program for breastfeeding work at an outpatient clinic setting. And as you can imagine, clinics are a really important place for families as they transition after giving birth. They transition from that care in a hospital or a birth center or wherever they might have been to their primary care clinic. And so to be part of this program, clinics are going to complete a self-assessment and receive support from us to make some of these changes. And it could be to a policy or a practice, or it could be, creating a private lactation room that meets state and federal guidelines. And so with that, I'm going to invite Louisa up to talk about adult vaccinations.
Thank you. Welcome up, Louisa.
Thank you, Council Member. So I'm just going to quickly speak to the adult vaccination component of REACH, and then what's next, and we'll stand for questions. So REACH, the pieces of REACH for adult immunizations is really focused on education and outreach, and so we have leveraged other funding to be able to do clinics, and in 2024 we've done over 87 clinics, reached providing over 1,700 immunizations, and this is an increase from 22 and 23. So during those clinics, then we do provide outreach and education and additional information on what vaccinations are required or recommended, and answer community questions. We also participate in events that are not clinical events, where we are just there to do outreach and provide information and answer questions. And then in addition, we work with community organizations to train trusted messengers from those communities so that they are able to have those conversations and provide information within community where, the health department might not be there as a government entity, but community is having those conversations amongst themselves and getting that information. So that's, in a nutshell, the work for our immunizations, and it wouldn't be possible without the team that is out there every week doing either a clinic or an outreach event and engaging with the community members. So in terms of looking ahead for REACH, as we mentioned, there's some uncertainty around the amount of federal funding that we may continue to receive, but we are excited to move projects from our design and assessment phase to full implementation, and with that, having evaluation and thinking of sustainability being hand in hand with that full implementation. We're also looking at, we'll have the strategies, but looking at, are there new projects or new partners that we'll need to engage to build on the work that is currently being done? And we will continue to seek additional funding to complement the REACH work so that we can continue to do the work that we're doing. So at this time, we are happy to stand for questions. Jenny would be the point of contact for the chronic disease, myself for immunizations, and that's, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jenny and Louisa, for the presentation today. We really appreciate it. I'll see if any of my colleagues have any questions. Otherwise, I can just jump into a few things that I have. Well, one, thank you for the presentation. Really helpful. I think it's important to point out the federal funding uncertainty and something that we need to keep a close eye on and figure out the potential impacts that could have on this work. And I also just want to say thank you for the work that you all are doing at the Little Earth neighborhood, Little Earth area. Those are incredible projects that really help the people that live there. So really happy to see that, on top of the other work that is happening in North Minneapolis as well. So I just want to say thank you. I'll first pass it on to Council President Payne, then Vice Chair Wansley. And I want to make sure that I have my list here. Vice Chair Walmsley and Councilmember Ellison are present.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the work and specifically speak to how your team does such great work integrating the work of the city with community and how we're expanding kind of our footprint more authentically through community connections. And I think that's just really important as we think about all domains of local government. So just wanted to say I'm grateful for that.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Walmsley.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I just wanted to go back to the slide around the art project that you're doing in conjunction with Little Earth, which also I was super, super excited to see this piece. And just wanted to flag that I'll be following up on this, but wanted to know if our Arts and Cultural Affairs Department was also involved in this, and maybe they are the department that's supporting somewhat the public art permit application. I'm trying to remember the process for that.
Yes, you are correct. There is definitely an established process through the Department of Arts and Cultural Affairs, and so I've been in touch with, I believe, Mary Altman and some other staff over there to make sure that we're following the proper process and eligibility, but we are really excited to bring it forward.
Reason again, super excited about this. Folks in Ward 2, I love my hippies. And not only just hippies, let me not just say hippies, but people, I think, in recent years have really gotten excited about how to bring art and essentially like traffic calming kind of hand in hand together. And you mentioned that too, and being able to use that in a culturally informed way. And it's great to see that be reflected in this particular spotlight and in this work, and knowing that our Arts and Cultural Department has a program in place that shows that we can link that. And I know there's been, at least throughout my tenure, I think it's some resistance around linking those two because it's new, it's innovative work, and I think residents have learned, we don't often have to wait for, what are they called? Bollards?
Bollards? The sticks in the road?
Yeah,
yes.
I know not all of our colleagues are pro bollards, but there's ways in which we can use art as a means of not only bringing just that cohesion to our community, and yes, shout out to 36th Street Collective in my ward that actually did a project. I can't recall if it was through the same process, but with the Verdoc and similar of, because there were speeding efforts, and really did a great job of bringing students along from different ethnic backgrounds and centralizing that cultural connection. So I was really, really excited to see this be brought forward too, and the engagement with young people. So yeah, this program is just like one of the moments in which we can highlight some of the positive work that's happening at the city, and I think oftentimes that does not get elevated. So this was really exciting to see this presentation today. So thank you all.
Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you. I'll keep it short. Just want to pile on to the thank yous to you guys and say, you guys aren't only bringing like your expertise and your effort and your teams to this issue, but also I want to acknowledge you guys are doing this in the context of like a lot of misinformation and uncertainty and having to battle that. And I know, Louis, you and I have had to be on like the radio program over North and talking about some of the misinformation around COVID vaccinations and all that kind of stuff. And I know that you've engaged with all my colleagues, and I know you guys are doing this work. And just want to acknowledge that some of that is what we're battling. And I never thought we'd be in a situation where this kind of work would have a little bit of an existential threat to it, but it's where we are, and I just want to acknowledge that you guys are doing an incredible job. When you're looking for partnerships, if you're looking for, you mentioned the community validators, for these issues. Let us know how we can be connecting you with people, or how we can, be on the ground supporting this work as well. Because I know that I'm very interested in making sure that this is work that does continue, that this is work that we continue to improve on, and that narratives around vaccinations or whatever don't get on the complete wrong side of that. And we're going to need this work more than ever as people are, eating more bear meat and raw milk or whatever. But thank you guys for the work, and really do see us as community partners as well as you guys are going into our wards.
Thank you.
Awesome. So, seeing no further questions or comments, I'll direct the clerk to receive and file that report. Vice Chair Wansley, Councilmember Ellison, would you like to be reflected on voting on the consent agenda on top of the postponement?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Clerk, can you, without objection, if we can make that happen? Okay. Great. And thanks so much for the presentation, Jenny and Louisa. Next up, the next item is receiving and filing a response report to the legislative directive related to the Navigation Center update and the use of city-owned land to address unsheltered homelessness. Here to present on this item is Director Eric Hansen from CPED. Thanks for being here, Director.
Thank you, Chair Chavez, and members of the committee. My name is Eric Hansen. I am the Director of Community Planning and Economic Development for the City of Minneapolis. And before you is the response to a legislative directive that you guys passed back in October of last year, asking 3 questions you see on the screen about the former navigation center that the city stood up in mid to late 2018 and into 2019. Review of that, and then some evaluations of potential sites in the city's inventory for potentially recreating a navigation center. I'll go over some of the highlights that are in the report. There's going to be more detail within the RCA that we submitted, but let me first talk about the response to question number 1. So going back to 2018, the need for the navigation center was spurred on by an encampment that was happening on the freeway wall along Hiawatha Avenue, known mostly as the Wall of Forgotten Natives. That encampment, the navigation center was a response to getting folks from that encampment in through some sort of navigator that gets them into supportive services, wraparound services, and then finally stable and safe housing. The development, the original conversation about a navigation center occurred between the city, Hennepin County, state of Minnesota, and a number of Native American tribes, because most of the people that were in this encampment were indigenous members of the community. At the time, the city coordinator was given the direction, the former city coordinator was given direction to lead the effort around the navigation center. And through that work, the city coordinator directed the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development to be responsible for site search, site selection, building out the location, overseeing the operations, and all the other responsibilities of operating the navigation center. Give you a sense of a timeline. We started in early September with the mayor and the council directing us to do this work. We started the site search process. We found a site in October, and I'll get to some details about this process. In October, we had to, as a city, we had to pass an emergency declaration for the to bypass some procurement rules, which I'll talk about in a second. And then through October through December was the get the thing set up, get procurement, buy the materials, get operators, get it all set up. And then it opened in early December. It opened and was open until about June of 2019. And at that point in time, the residents departed. We demobilized the navigation center in late June, and then subsequently in the late summer sold the equipment that was owned by the city. So staff involvement, we had a number of departments working on. CPED led a lot of the work around the operations, but the city coordinator also managed the overall project. We had the police department, the fire department, the public works department, the finance department, and emergency management all contributing in the team across the enterprise to get this stood up. The site costs about all in, it was about $2.9 million for both capital and operations costs. It was just north of that, just north of $3 million, but we were able to get some donations from Open Your Heart, Simpson Housing Services, and then recoup some funding from the sale of the structures that we put on the navigation center. So The city had to bear about a $3 million price tag for the navigation center. We did approach other funding, even though we started with other funding sources and other governments. The other governments declined to help defray the cost of that navigation center. So the site selection process, I'm going to talk a little bit about it now, and then I'm going to get into some specifics in question 2 because there's some overlap in those. But it was not a straightforward process. We as a staff had to look for something that was adequately sized for the people that were in the encampments. The site we actually landed on was about 0.8 of an acre. And I know we're not farmers here, but that's about 40,000 square feet. And we first looked at city-owned properties. The 3 properties that popped up that had the site, 2717 Longfellow Avenue, also known as the Roof Depot parking lot. I'll talk about that in a second. 2600 Minnehaha, which is a vacant redevelopment property for production and processing uses. I'll talk about that in a second. And then 1314 East 24th Street, which was a site that the Indigenous Peoples Task Force was going to develop for a project, and we have subsequently sold that property. We went down the path on all 3 of those properties and could not make a number of those work, and I'll talk about the Roof Depot and 2600 about why we had those issues. But we finally landed on a site at 2109 Cedar, which was owned and operated by the Red Lake Nation, and the Red Lake Nation leased it to the city for operations. The reason we only had the navigation center open until June is because they were building Minnow B, which is a housing development you see there today, and that construction was starting in mid-2019. And so we were able to secure that site. We then had to work with some neighbors. The Cedar Box Company was across the street. They were very nervous. I'll get into the apprehension of community members around sites when we get into answer to question 2, but we had to negotiate some security costs and some cameras and some other things to get the Cedar Box Company comfortable with having this navigation center across the street. We also had the Cedar Box Company made cardboard boxes, and so there was a concern that there'd be somebody make it into the building, and it was a big fire risk. So we worked with the fire department as well to make sure that we were mitigating any fire issues that we might see from that risk. Initially, the city council approved a budget about $1.5 million, but we had to exceed those costs, and it's because we had to go so fast. So we learned really quickly that we needed to we did not have the regular time to use the procurement process to go through what I'd say is like a steady competitive bidding process that would have probably given us some cost benefits, because the direction from the mayor and the city council was to get this open as soon as possible, and it was in October. We were trying to get this thing set up in by winter, so December, close to winter. We were very fortunate because if you remember, if those who were in the region back in 2019 remember, we had a polar vortex in February of that month, of that next year. So it was very timely to have that up and running because we were able to keep the people that were formerly in the Wall of Forgotten Natives in the Navigation Center in warm accommodations. So we went pretty fast, and that's why the emergency declaration was issued by the City Council in October to allow for us as a staff to set aside procurement rules. And because we had to set aside procurement rules, we went to find things that would work. And we searched the oil fields of North Dakota for structures that could accommodate people. We ended up on a big tent that is called a sprung structure. We were able to put those up to accommodate about 130. At the peak, there was 160 people on the Navigation Center. We also had challenges getting the ancillary buildings. We had a community building, we had some services, and then like showers and bathrooms. We had some contractors that pulled out of the contract after they found out what the use was for, so we had to go out really with some intentionality about we are needing to lease this equipment for the Navigation Center. We're able to find a contractor at that point in time. The build-out, we were able to use some native-owned firms for contracting and architecture. We used Rachel Construction to do some demolition. We cleared stuff that were on the surface and then encapsulated the site with some blacktop, some things underneath the ground that needed to be cleaned up, but those would have been cleaned up during the housing construction. And by encapsulating it with the asphalt, we were able to keep people who were at the navigation center protected from what was underneath the asphalt. Let's see here. So all in told, we got the sprung structures. We bought all the equipment, furnishing equipment like cots, dividers, foot lockers, resident storage. We heated it, we powered it, we put water into it, we put fencing. We had some ancillary buildings, as I said. We had our Public Works Department providing solid waste removal on a regular basis. We put up security cameras and had security officers and guards on and around the site. Let's see here. Okay. Operations around the Navigation Center. We had Simpson Housing Services operator. The city does not provide this kind of service, so we needed somebody with competence and the wherewithal to do it. We did find out that as we started this service that we needed a property manager as well, and so we were able to bring in PPL kind of in flight. A lot of this stuff was kind of building the airplane in the air. Simpson also brought in a Vivo to assist residents with chemical dependency issues, because there's a lot, as you know, for folks that are in encampments, there is a chemical dependency issue. I believe back then a lot of it was heroin, as different from what we see now, which is a lot of fentanyl in the encampments. And then as far as operational, the city was intensely involved in the operations, convening a weekly meeting with all of the service providers, all the departments that are, the Minneapolis Police Department, EMS, Fire Department, Public Works, and Simpson, PPL, and other contractors that they brought in. So just to make sure we understood what was going on. So fast forward to June of 2019, that's when we had to demobilize. We pulled down everything to allow for Red Lake to do their housing development. At that point in time, we were able to sell. We offered the sprung structures at our competitive bids. Nobody bought them, so we negotiated a sale with Red Lake, and they purchased them for $180,000. We sold those in September 2019. And then as of the coordinator's office reported on this back in May of 2019. 2 weeks before the Navigation Center was required to leave, the data that we have is 130 residents were exited or had exited. 68 had positive exits. They went into new housing, and another 62 had negative exits, which is they were asked to leave. They exited without engaging in services, or unfortunately some found their way to jail.
Excuse me, Director, do you mean to move your slide? There you go, thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I've got a lot of packed information on the slides here for you. I was hoping the narrative would captivate you even more than the slides would today. All right, question 2. So if you want, that's how the Navigation Center happened in 2018 and 2019. What does it mean if you want to look at a city site, if you want to put up a new Navigation Center? And when we looked at it, we thought about it like we need an adequate site that would be open, and it's flexible because you can put in, if you're only serving a few people, it's a small site. If you're serving a lot, it's a lot larger. But based on what we learned from the Navigation Center in 2018, we looked at anything that's 3/4 acre or larger within the city's redevelopment authority property. And after that, we also thought about where in the city to have it, given where we're seeing larger congregate encampment sites. They seem to be forming in 1st precinct, 3rd precinct, and 5th precinct. So we evaluated land that we have in those precincts. And I have 3 candidates Each of them are challenging candidates to review. So, and this is where I'm going to bring back our site selection. So back in site selection time in 2018, 2 of these sites were evaluated, 2717 Longfellow and 2600 Minnehaha. They are still owned by the city of Minneapolis, but they still have complications. And then I'll get to the 3605. So 2717 is the parking lot in front of the roof depot. And this committee is very much aware of all of the work that the city has done to try and sell this. But we have evaluated it and we're sharing it with you as it has the size to potentially accommodate a navigation center if it is a short term. I am hopeful and eager for the Minnesota legislature to make good on its commitment to the Roof Depot project and appropriate the money that it's supposed to appropriate. If they do that, this site comes off of the list pretty fast because we will be moving to sell it before some funding expires at the end of June. So, but just for discussion's sake, I wanted to raise it because there are things outside of our control to see where that project goes. 2600 Minnehaha is an industrial product and industrial site that we have had for a number of years. We've talked about that with this council about using this property. I've told this council that this property is too small for a conventional industrial development, and we have RFP'd it periodically over the last 2 decades and been unsuccessful in finding a tenant. When we put this up for consideration, this was our number 1 site of city-owned property in 2019. The properties directly to the west and directly to the east and directly to the north have either a religious congregation or a charter school. And those folks showed up and told us that they would rather not have a navigation center on this site. So those uses still exist as of today. It is a city site. I wanted to share it with you, but I think it's very complicated for us to use that as a navigation center. And then the final one is in Ward 12. It's 3605 44th Street. It's just in between Snelling. It's on 44th Street. It's in between Snelling and Hiawatha. And this is a former Public Works yard. It's Snelling Yards. If you're around City Hall, I call it Snelling Yards. We have a development agreement with Lupe Development Partners to redevelop it for a mixed-use affordable housing building. We are working through the last points of the deal of that development. I'm expecting that we will come to the City Council with some updated terms in the near term, but it is something that could potentially be available for a short-term navigation center like we did back in 2018, 2019. The challenge with this site is we have done no community engagement, and we were not going to do community engagement around this topic because we don't know if we are actually going to get there. When we talk about navigation centers, it raises people's concern, and so I just wanted to make you aware. If you see to the east or to the right of the to the left of the to the east, you'll see some residential properties, and so we would have to be very mindful about how we would operate it. So those are the 3 properties that we saw, and so what that really tells us is we'd have to do what we did last time, find something else, because the things that we have in our inventory are probably not going to be ones that will be really supported in community like we would want them to be supported in community. So those are the city sites. The anticipated costs, we did not do a deep dive. We did not go out and do estimates and see how much structures would cost. We did not design anything. We're just taking what we learned from the last time and saying in the range of $3 million for capital costs, because that's kind of how much it cost last time. We think we paid a premium because we went so fast. We probably, if we have some time, won't have to pay that premium, but that gives you a ballpark, so plus or minus. If we're moving forward, we would do a deeper analysis about how much it would cost, and then based on what we saw in operational costs and some casual conversations with operators. We think that operating costs will be about $1.5 million a year or so, and that depends on service levels and people that are interested. We did a survey of service providers in a conversation roughly about a year ago about navigation centers. Each one of them declined to want to be interested in operating one, so that would be a barrier to having a navigation center operate again. But we'd still have to test it. If the council were to push forward for one of these things and we were moving forward, we'd have to go find if they're really, because that was a casual conversation, not anything binding. Let's see, what else? We'd also look at a property manager. We haven't asked about property management service in the marketplace to see if anybody would be interested, but it's the service provider that's the most important. Property manager, if we have a good service provider, the property manager, I think, will be easier to nail. Let's see, other considerations that we think we want to remember is we're very interested in doing this collaboratively with other governments. I will say that it was very expensive to the city to do this. This is a community issue, and we work collaboratively with the state and the county around unsheltered homelessness. If this would be one of the components in the system, we would like some time to negotiate with the county and the state to see if they could participate. We are having conversations with those entities about better system alignment. Those conversations go on at multiple tables from different vantage points within the enterprise. But that is something I think is very critical for us if we are going to move forward, is not to go it alone. It could be very costly to the city, and it's something that I think that we have a shared outcome for. And then the last thing, the third question was similar to the second question. So most of it about where the city land could be considered a navigation center, but it also talked about the city's interest in affordable housing and providing housing. And this is just the shameless plug that the city of Minneapolis invests millions of dollars every year for production of rental housing, stabilization of housing, of providing ownership opportunities, and rehab of people who own houses in the city. And we have a Way Home report that will be coming to you again this year. We can talk about that more and get into detail. I won't bore you with all of the details about that, but we have these 7 strategies that are still salient today, and we are hopeful that we will continue to be able to do that into the future, because that is where the city really thrives, around helping people find stable and safe housing. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, so first, looking at here, we'll pass it on to Vice Chair Wansley, and then Council President Payne.
I'm not even on. Thank you, Director Henson, for this presentation. I did want to revisit in terms of some of the site options. Of course, the 2,600, especially considering that's in my ward, and knowing I've also worked with Councilmember Osmond around the issuing of the RFP to try to figure out what can we do to activate that site. And within its current zone usage, but also knowing it's just not fitting for that. And also knowing the concerns that you've raised around, okay, what does it look like to align potentially a navigation site, or with some of the concerns with what other stakeholders in that community have raised, as you highlighted. But since then, we do have the South Minneapolis Community Safety Center that is coming online. So I wasn't sure if those conversations have happened since then, in terms of that coming into the mix, where you will have the reintroduction of now the third precinct, and now depending other services in that building that's also related to safety, not tied to MPD. That might ease some of those concerns, because as you highlighted too, it sounds like security, of course, was one of the biggest components in getting buy-in from some of the providers and stakeholders in the first navigation site.
Chair Chavez, Vice Chair Wansley, I would say agree with all of those points. And I think when we look at 2600 Meha, we did not go out and do engagement there either, because we did not want to raise up. We wanted to give you the information that you asked for, but not raise expectations in community in case it was just an informational push. But I'm expecting that when people see things like a navigation center, in my experience in community development, those who do not want something to change will show up. And I'm expecting they'll think about the things that are the most, the worst case scenario will prevail. Mm-hmm. And so until you show that it isn't going to be the worst case scenario in their mind, that is what people will think, and they will show up. So I'm expecting that if we went out and did community engagement, we would get the same response, even with the community safety center across the street coming online soon. Mm-hmm. But it's really, we'd have to see if there's there could be some mitigations mm-hmm. to those fears. The difference between the Cedar Box Company in the last iteration, Cedar Box Company was a box manufacturing facility, not a school with kids, and the council at the time decided that it was better to mitigate the risks to the box company as opposed to what they would need to do with the issues that the school was raising, and that's the one right next door that raised most of the concerns. Mm-hmm. So those things would probably still prevail, but I mean, it just take time. It would take time.
And that's fair that you're raising that. And I had made the assumption that, or thought I had heard that engagement was done around 2600, and I think it is still worth doing that engagement and knowing things have changed. But I mean, we are bringing the third precinct back, and that also came with half of that neighborhood having to deal with it being almost burnt down and seeing the city go up in flames. So they've had to bear the trauma of that coming back into the community and dealing with the trauma of that. So let alone with also having a resource coming into the community that could mitigate also some of the other issues that they're experiencing, livability issues of chronic homelessness, and especially since we do have the presence of additional resources that, from my understanding, the Community Safety Center is trying to incorporate. Yep. You have the presence of also the Lake Street Safety Center that's around the corner. It sounds like we have some more resources to, yes, people are going to have fears, understandably, but yes, just thinking of a different context in which we can hopefully say there are some things we're going to put in place. But
Chair Chavez, Vice Chair Wansley, this property out of the ones that I showed you has the least amount of development opportunity encumbrances. So if you are looking for a city site, irrespective of the context around it, this one has there's no ties to it. We were talking about, we made the commitment that we'll RFP it at a time. We have not scheduled that, so don't ask the question. But we will RFP it at some time, but we have not done that yet, and it can be, kind of mothballed if that was used. It's just just from our experience in the last go round, we think you'll get a lot of political pressure to not use that site, but it's open. The other two that we proposed, the Roof Depot doesn't need a lot of more explanation, but we're going to get to yes with the Lupe people. So that site's only open potentially for a couple months, but I think you get the same concern from that site too. So not great options at all in our inventory.
And I'm trying to also think too, and granted, future of. We'll revisit this too, of just thinking what additional space, because there's still, it seems like, to be determined with even the Southside Community Safety Center itself, of what space is available, where some of, because I don't even know I'm assuming the Navigation Center had mostly sleeping quarters, and then you said there was a separate kind of space for, of course, showers. I wish there was kind of a blueprint of how it looked in a way to get a sense of how you mentioned the square footage was utilized too.
Chair Chair Chavez, Vice Chair Wansley, we would like that too. This thing went so fast that the records are not really, like, we had to press upon people's memories and notes from the time, but we did not write that out. But if you think about it, there were the sprung structures, so they look like Quonset huts, if you can familiarize yourself. So a lot of beds inside the sprung structures, cots, and then like footlockers. So a number of, and I don't remember the number of those. And then there was a separate temporary building constructed so you could do the social services and the food. And then there were trailers for the showers and the bathroom facility so they could get pulled out. So if you've ever been to a large festival and you see a trailer with bathrooms on it, or if you're in like one of those festivals where you're sleeping overnight, you've probably seen the shower sites too. That's kind of what you had at the site, and it was pretty packed in there when it was all put up. There was some passageways, and I have visited it. I didn't do the count then, but it was a number of years ago. It was pretty tight.
Okay. And you said at its peak you had 160, even though it was designed for 130. Intentionally for, in there. Okay. And then just also last question. I also had the assumption too that the county was a partner in funding in this. So you're saying this was all funded through the city?
Yeah. Chair Chavez, Vice Chair Wansley, we do a lot of work with the county and they do a ton of work with unsheltered homeless individuals in our community. This one, they did not have the funding for us, and I don't know the negotiations. We could not get that. I could not get that detail. I was not involved in those negotiations. I would imagine if we had to do an emergency declaration, I'm just speculating, but if we had to do an emergency declaration, the county did not have the need to do that. They wouldn't probably been able to give us funding. That's why we're talking about it now. If we were to do something now, we want to have the lead time so we could negotiate with other funders and find the way to work together.
And I'm assuming also philanthropic partners. Is this just not a sector that they're responsive to also, or
Chair Chavez, Vice Chair Wansley, I'm not putting the philanthropy sector on blast.
Names.
I think the speed was also killed us with that conversation too. So there were some, as I put in the memo or in the RCA, there were some investments from outside sources. The Simpson Housing Service was able to go to their funders and get some money, but I mean, we were moving. I mean, it was 2 months from the city authorizing the emergency declaration to opening. And we didn't have we just basically had a site and we had to figure all that stuff out. So it went pretty fast. And again, I think it wasn't because of a will from philanthropy. It was just speed just killed it.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Next up, we have Council President Payne.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. You spoke to this a little bit, and it doesn't seem like there's been explicitly formal conversations about this, but it seems like there's been a lot of kind of informal anecdotes that there's just no service provider that would be willing to do this. When we've done engagement on this topic, talking to individual service providers, there sounded like there was a willingness to do this, and the bridge I'm trying to understand between those two kind of diametrically opposed perspectives seems to be that if you're asking a service provider today, right now, under their current fiscal reality, do they have the capacity to step in? The answer is probably no, but I think what we're trying to get at is what would it take from a resource perspective to get providers on the table? And I'm wondering, I was actually kind of surprised. I've heard a lot of mythology about the Navigation Center, and I was at City Hall at the time, and I was in the coordinator's office at the time, but it was like such a flurry of activity, it was kind of hard to follow. But the kind of general mythology of it is that it was extremely expensive. And you look at the capital expenses, and that was pretty big, but I was actually surprised in this presentation to see it was just over $100,000 a month for the 7-month of operations, which seems much more attainable. I'm sure there's some in-kind services that are not reflected in that number and other types of offsets, but I'm curious, Again, understanding there haven't been any like formal conversations around this, what your perspective is on this around the caveat that service providers wouldn't want to step into this unless the resources were there from a sustainability perspective, because that seemed like that was the caveat. And that if you just ask a service provider today, and we've seen this already with some of our most established service providers, the types of fiscal cliffs that they're facing, if we could remove, I'm curious if we could remove some of those fiscal constraints, how would that change that conversation from your perspective?
Chair Chavez, Council President Payne. So I will tell you, agree. You and I have had this conversation about well, they told me this and they told you that, So we will not really know until we actually articulate what it is that we're trying to achieve. And that, I think, was a complication in the last one. And much like community has when they come to some sort of major change in the neighborhood, organizations rely back on the history of the last time they did it. And so it was kind of a moving, from what I understand, it was moving pretty quickly about what the objective of the navigation center was. It wasn't just to find some stability for people that were in an encampment along a highway wall. It was also trying to align a system to get you into housing. And just in the last year of being really close to this issue, it is not my area of expertise, but I'm getting a real PhD education in it. Our systems right now are well-intentioned but unaligned in a lot of ways to take somebody out of an encampment and get them into long-term housing, and there's a missing piece. And the navigation center, I think, was intended to be that middle missing piece to get you into. You're in a tent. You got services. You got chemical dependency, food, all that sort of thing, and then we will get you into housing. Not all the folks in the encampment are ready for that next step, and so I think what we've heard, at least what I heard directly from the service providers, is that was a very challenging. They were not prepared for that level of service, and their models even aligning with people under that those addiction conditions. When we had the meeting last year, they were talking about fentanyl and how extraordinarily challenging it is. And I'm taking their word for it. I haven't vetted this with our health department folks, aside from them going, yeah, fentanyl is really it takes you down, and getting off of fentanyl has a different model from what I've been told, and that is a lot. So yes, these organizations are facing fiscal cliffs. The whole homeless response system is facing a fiscal cliff. The shelter systems, you've heard enough information about that. We will keep telling you about that. But also, how is the model of service for people that are in these situations that have hit this, condition where they're finding refuge and community in an encampment, and where are we at? And right now, I think we're working towards that system change. That system change takes time. One of the experts at system change and how long it takes to do that. But I think that's one of the things is they're apprehensive mainly because of the experience of the last one. And so can we give assurances? Can we give assurances not only that we are providing financial support to do the work at a right model, but the model itself is going to help with the folks that they'll encounter in the navigation center.
And then a follow-up question on this, because I think, every single time I have this funding conversation, especially with partners at the county, it's kind of like you have your capital one-time expenses and your ongoing expenses. And it feels like one of the conversations that is almost like just circular for many years is that's the county's role, that's the county's role, that's the county's role. And I'm not comfortable watching our community struggle in this way and then dusting my hands clean and saying I don't have a role to play here. And so I'm trying to figure out what a productive role is to play for us at the local level. And the thing that I'm constantly thinking about as to why is the answer that it's the county's role? And I think part of that answer is the funding stream. So they get federal dollars, hopefully still, for the continuum of care. Whereas any intervention that we're going to fund is going to largely be funded by property taxes, and that has an inherently regressive element to it. And so, is even before the current federal administration, was there enough funding stream from the federal government to the county for a response? The answer to that's probably clearly no. Under the current federal administration, the answer to that is certainly no. And so a role I think we need to play at the city level is, it doesn't, like, the reality is the funding stream doesn't matter. The reality is that the people are outside on the streets right now, and it's been very cold again, and somebody needs to do something, right? And so I'm trying to think through, as you're presenting, whether it's a navigation center that has meaningful and significant capital expenses to get initiated, or this kind of concept that some of my colleagues have been talking about around like a navigation hub. We just did some emergency funding for MIWRC that's effectively operating as a kind of smaller scale navigation hub. That feels much more achievable to me, and it doesn't have as much of a capital outlay in terms of the partnership there. And I feel like we could probably identify a number of organizations that if we could develop the model for operating, we could maybe perhaps fund at a scale that does fit within a city budget. But either way, I'm just trying to think through, this work needs to happen regardless of the funding stream. The model needs to be developed in a way that's a little bit more mature and robust rather than slapped together in 2 months, which is probably one of the indicators as to why our service providers are maybe traumatized from that experience and are not quick to raise their hand to say they want to do it again. But I think you're highlighting that, hey, if we can do this in a very intentional way, we could do it in a way that could scale, in a way that at its smallest operational unit can fit within our budget. Maybe that's how we should be thinking about this, so that we can prove out the model in a much more intentional way at a scale that is achievable within our budget, and then scale it up by partnering with, if not the county, then at least the state as a funder, so that we can help enable more community organizations that already have kind of some foundational capacity as far as infrastructure and building to be able to ultimately get folks into the stable housing and treatment that they need. And I'm wondering if you have any just perspective on that, kind of like city sources of funding versus county sources of funding.
Chair Chavez, Council President Payne, I think that is a little bit more robust analysis need before I could answer that question, because I would have to rely on a number of folks within the enterprise, but also have a better understanding of the county. Again, it's not my area of expertise around this homelessness response system. I've been learning a lot in the last year, but I have not gained the expertise to tell you definitively what that is. But it's something that we absolutely can get information from others to answer your question.
I don't even know how to document that as a administrative follow-up. Maybe as an administrative follow-up, we could get some clarity on funding streams for homeless response as it relates to state, county, and local.
Yeah. Chair Chavez, Council President Payne, I can work with the folks within the enterprise to see what we know.
Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, well, I think I'm up next. Thank you, Director Hansen, for the presentation. Really appreciated it. I think there's two things here for at least for me to ask, not necessarily ask questions, maybe some few comments. I like that there was at least addresses provided. I think even if maybe some of them have complications behind them, I think it's an important conversation that needs to be had, whether it's Ruth Depot site, listed in Ward 12, or even the 2600 site, Minnehaha Avenue South site. If we were to move forward on trying to work with the administration on this, what do you recommend?
Chair Chavez, so one of the challenging parts of a navigation center is the land use designation. It's the safe outdoor sleeping ordinance that you're one of the authors of. We'll look at addressing that. I think that's probably the first step before, there was kind of an emergency. I mean, we declared it. We declared an emergency last time. I think if we want to be more thoughtful and planful, we probably need to start with a land use ordinance change before we were able to do it. And then at the same time, we would have to really dig into, could we put this together in the collaborative fashion that we need to, and would it have results that we would desire? I will use this opportunity to say how important it is for us as a community to look at long-term solutions. We need culturally competent facilities that are constructed out of wood and metal, not tents, that help folks that are finding refuge in encampments to get out of that, because that missing middle is there. And you've got my commitment from the community development apparatus to work with our partners to figure that out, because that's not something we can do in 2 months. That's something that takes some time. And looking at potential sites for, facilities that we can build, and partners. And the Native community, MUD, and others have been engaged with the administration about that exact thing. And so that's one of the things that I think we have to look at is there a short-term need but a long-term need, and then can we come together at what is the problem we're trying to solve and what success looks like? Because I think, given my experience watching this, I don't know if we're all on the same page.
For sure. Thank you. And I think for us, it's whether it's looking at some of these sites to potentially do a navigation center, and that's thinking big picture, similar to what was created in the past. I think, to Council President Payne's point, the conversations we've had with some community members, it's like, what do navigation hubs look like? They might be a smaller scale. It might need smaller land. It might be working with an existing building or a nonprofit partner that is already doing this work, and it just is about providing city funding to create a partnership to address this issue. So I think that when I think about a navigation center, I also think about navigation hubs, smaller scale, figure out how we can work with our partners, see how it works, and eventually you can scale up. I think the issue right here is that this issue is very pressing, and I think we have to try many different things, including this in the past. I understand that maybe there was concerns, maybe some things that people wish it could have been done better, but the reality is, in my opinion, I felt like this had some successes, and I feel like we could learn from those successes and work with community, work with our partners at the county and state, and figure out how we could do something even better. So the reason I'm saying those things out loud is because these are big sites, but I think that there's also an opportunity to think about smaller scale, smaller sites, navigation hubs, like the way that the MIWRC is doing their work. That's an example of something that could be like a navigation hub with more support, more sustainability. So that's why I'm mentioning those comments, but I did, and thanks for clarifying, like if we were to decide to figure out how to work with the administration and how to move forward, how we would do that, that's conversations we'd like to have, and we'll be following up on that too. Okay. So, thank you. Next up, we have Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's a bit awkward to enter into this conversation as somebody who's around, because I both understand the need for us to do much more than what we're doing. What we're doing now is not working. And the Navigation Center was born out of a lot of urgency, and I think in some ways represented or facilitated, I should say, the city getting a little bit more hands-on on this issue than, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the city before had completely delegated this issue to the county. I think we had a few folks who worked on something at the city, but we weren't really hands-on in this issue. And so in that regard, I think that the Navigation Center was needed in its context. But as somebody who walked through it a number of times, as somebody who who talked to the service providers at the time, I think that I can kind of see the dissonance between someone who didn't witness what it was, kind of only knows what the purpose was. And then the folks who did witness what it was, who are like, why would you want to do that? There's a little bit of a distance there that I'm sensing. And I just think that even though I'm glad we're getting this presentation, I'm glad we're able to ask questions here in this platform, but I don't think we're going to achieve a solution in this platform. And I think that if we're going to do something that works, it's going to require a lot more communication. I know that, I kind of came up during a time where we did work groups and council members were very involved. Even in the navigation center, council members were incredibly involved. I remember there was a whole conversation about structures where we were looking at a number of structures, and council members were involved in that conversation and able to sort of not just get a staff report, but also kind of maybe be in a meeting where it's dawning on you just how small one structure is versus another, and you're like, actually, we thought that was going to work, and it's not going to work. That kind of communication can't happen, on the dais here, and so I think that to the question of if council wants to be engaged with the administration, and I think that it has to look like maybe we don't have to call it an internal work group, but I think it would have to look something like that, because otherwise we're never going to be able to bridge that distance between what staff know, what staff experienced, what our service providers experienced, and then what we're trying to do. Also, in those kinds of spaces, you realize just how difficult it is to nail down what you're trying to achieve. It feels like, well, we're trying to end homelessness, right? But I look at that amount, that basically $4.5 million, right, from the presentation that we just saw, and I could think of, I think we could all think of, but as somebody who was around, I could think of probably a couple dozen things that I would want to put $4.5 million towards to address homelessness before I would even consider a navigation center based on what I saw. And so I think that there just needs to be a lot more discussion. If that discussion doesn't occur, and I think the administration needs to hear this, then I think we're constantly going to have council members trying to solve this issue from the dais, admin being a little bit obstructionist to whatever the solution is going to be, and then we're going to continue to have disagreements about encampment evictions and that kind of thing. But yeah, as somebody who saw what the navigation center was in reality, and I get that it doesn't have to be that, I believe that it doesn't have to be that in reality, but I think that the only way to make it something better than what it was, because it wasn't dignified living. I think, I think I feel pretty confident in saying that, but it was, in its context, a necessary step in order for us to address the wall of forgotten natives. So, with that contradiction existing, how do we create something better without recreating what was? And I just feel like already looking at sites, already looking at where this thing might go, trying to create a timeline and a budget, I think is just going to aim us towards possibly recreating some of the pitfalls, some of the negatives. And I think we're just starting with a process that's a little bit too overly prescriptive. And I wonder how, maybe this is a question that you can't answer on your own, Director Hansen, but I feel like we're a little bit in a cart before the horse situation. How do we get on the same page so that this isn't the process? We select a site, we start going asking people if they want to do it, but all they can remember is what existed before. And I just don't think we're actually going to end up with a navigation center or more investments in homelessness if things continue to kind of move along at this clip in this manner. And so I guess I just wanted to jump in and say that, just because I'm looking at the presentation, I'm remembering walking through the navigation center, and I'm thinking, we're out of whack here. I don't know how to get this. We've got a good goal. I don't know that we have a good process.
Chair Chavez, Councilmember Ellison, I don't know if I heard a question in there. I kind of heard one. Let's see if I got it. But what I would say in response, the reason I'm here today is responding to a request for information that you as a body wanted, and so that's what we're obligated to present on. And I hear what you're saying. Like, this is a very complicated issue around how we are as a community. And it requires, as Chair Chavez said, a lot of different strategies. And this is very prescriptive if you, in its face, if you say, we're going to go down to Navigation Center. One of the things I raised earlier is making sure we know exactly why we're doing it, because that'll be much easier for us to get everybody around. I would then, balloon that out because it's part of something. It's part of a system, and articulating that would be important. And I think that would allay the concerns that people might have. Community concerns too, if they know that this is something that's helpful and additive and not something that's extractive, then they probably have it. I think as far as the conversation about how this new government structure works together, I'd have to defer to, getting back to you, and, because I want to be respectful of the apparatus that I report to, and making sure that I'm not speaking out of turn and talk to you. But, community development practice is a collaboration. So that's how we approach most of our work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I would say, if things continue council members are going to continue to try to solve problems in our communities. That's what we're designed to do. That's what everybody up here is trying to do. I think that if there's not collaboration, though, then what I can see, and there was a question of like, how are they built? I could almost like probably draw it from memory, the layout and where things were, and kind of describe it, some of the interiors as well. I don't want to bemoan like the horrors of the Navigation Center, Councilmember, but we've heard enough of that. But I also remember why it was needed. What I'll say is that like, if we don't figure out what the collaboration's gonna be, and how we're gonna move forward, and how we're gonna move forward in a way that we agree, then we're gonna continue to have council funding things that the admin won't do, and then we're gonna have the admin continue to do things that the council won't fund, and I don't know how that creates a solution in the community, especially on this issue that I think we're, maybe not we as capital C city, but we as a broader region, that I think we're failing. And so, that would be sort of like my final observation is, and the reason that the first iteration of the Navigation Center was able to happen in the first place was because of an excessive amount of communication. And I don't even see that, and that's what it took to create something that we all kind of look back on and think we could do better. I don't see that level of communication even happening now, which tells me I don't think we're going to create something even better than that. And so, I don't know, that's my final observation. Not really a question and all that, but yeah. But you're happy, welcome a response.
Yeah. Chair Chavez, Councilmember Ellison, I do really want to not make this about the Navigation Center was a disaster or a negative thing. Like, it was a complicated process, but I think we should look back at that with some mixed results. We should be open-eyed about what we did, but we were able as a community, as a city, to move very quickly to meet a need in a collaboration, even if we didn't get everything right, but we could learn from that. And as you see in the data that we gleaned from the coordinator's report back in May of 2019, more than half had positive exits from the Navigation Center. And that's where I want to think about is more than half of the people that were living at the Wall of Forgotten Natives encampment found safe, dignified housing out of the Navigation Center. And while the service providers, with all of the various issues that the council president raised, are facing then and still face now, and the hesitancy to go into one of these things, there was success in the Navigation Center. And so we can't let those, we have to learn from those lessons, but we also have to remember that we are serving here community, and the community issues are really complicated. And so we can learn the successful things that we did with the Navigation Center as well.
Can I say one more thing? I 100% agree. I think one of the things that I'm reflecting on is that some of those lessons, some of what we learned, we put into other projects, like Avivo Villages, for example. And I can't remember the per person cost. We probably could just do simple division on it, but I can't remember the final per person cost. But I remember the final per person cost ended up being like 3 times what we projected it to be originally. And when I think about the Navigation Center, the like where we have corrected those strategies, and the per person cost and not just the per person cost, but the per person outcome, I wonder if there aren't strategies that are more efficient and more successful that again were born out of those learnings, and like, you know, shouldn't we, how can we recreate that? Because I think that-that's the less so than the total cost or the per person cost, the per person outcome. There were successes, but you know, did we leverage our money in the best way? And I remember having a conversation I had with a former colleague about the Navigation Center a couple of years back, and I think that, like, all lessons learned, one of the things that I walked away feeling was we might have been, based on how much we spent per person, we might have been better off just cutting them a check, right? Like every single person that lived in the Navigation Center, that might have produced better outcomes. Like it's just a straight cash infusion to those folks, right? Would all of them have succeeded? No, but I don't know. But it was an exorbitant cost, and I don't know if the cost per success rate was more successful than handing out a check. Yep. And so that's, you know, I'll just kind of leave that observation there and let folks jump in. But those are some of the things that are coming to mind. And again, not that I have the solution, but I do think that a lot more communication and a lot more sort of offline communication needs to be occurring if we're ever going to sort of bridge this dissonance between what the administration's doing and the solutions that council's trying to propose.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, there's no questions in what I need to say.
Okay.
The deficits that Councilmember Ellison talks about are directly related to the fact that we as a municipality don't have the capacity to address these complex needs alone. We can't do this work well when we do it alone. Early in Councilmember Ellison's what he was sharing, I'd have said the Navigation Center was born out of desperation. And I can acknowledge there's still desperation to do more in our community. I remember, I think, Councilmember Ellison, you were part of those structure work groups, right, with Mr. David Frank, Mr. Chuck Lutz, and others. And having an infant at the time, I kept wondering how some of these solutions would work for somebody like me as a new mom. And it wouldn't. I think we can all agree, and especially Councilmember Ellison and I, who were here for this first Navigation Center experience, that we're in a different environment. Different types of chemical dependency are what we're seeing in encampments today. New experiences over the past 5 years and community trauma right here, as Councilmember Wansley pointed out. New government assets and placement with the new community safety center nearby. Maybe offer a new opportunity. But we have a lot more experience in handling encampments and knowing the issues around it, which we have to be candid about: guns and sex trafficking and how people show up to prey on vulnerable people, not to mention all the issues that we experienced during the Navigation Center around food, constant destruction of toilets, norovirus issues. Two of the most important things that I learned back during that time is, one, we really need to engage other agencies for funding and support before we move forward with action plans. Like you said, there wasn't time to do that then. We were rushing against the weather. And the second thing I learned was that with and despite the best of intentions, this did not create humane living conditions. We should be focused on longer-term housing. The next iteration of this specific Navigation Center, the property turning into culturally specific housing, and I think one that is specifically focused on people working on their sobriety, did just that. The second iteration of what this property was then kind of turned into, I think, was that most logical evolution of that Navigation Center from that winter. Also, it was clear we're not a housing provider, that's the county's job. I think we are all on the same page as supporters of housing first as a strategy, and we acknowledge this ain't our strong suit. You don't want this to be a navigation center was a disaster type conversation. And I also acknowledge we learned a lot from it, and we've done better with that wisdom as we then toppled headfirst into the encampments of and during the pandemic. Avivo, yes, was mentioned, working with the state, trying out Helix as a strategy. The good here has to topple forward to ideas that we'll have here and into the future. But it doesn't mean we should go back to the navigation center. A couple points that you had mentioned that I couldn't agree with more were we need a property manager and a service provider. A service provider is not necessarily a property manager and vice versa, right? We are not a direct service provider. And our primary approach, and something that I think we're really good at on the ground, is connecting people to Hennepin County. So what I'm reminded of hearing your presentation today and thinking back to those navigation centers of the past, is that this is not and was not sustainable in any ongoing way. I can't agree more with what Councilmember Ellison said, suggesting that $4.5 million could have been used in better ways. I was just doing the math here. It might have still been more cost effective actually than Avivo on a per person basis, but it was so temporary in Avivo much longer. So I think we come to that with our experiences of what this was in reality, this navigation center. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And next up, we have Vice Chair Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I think we're kind of, I think there's points of agreement, but where I'm seeing we're missing each other right now as like passing ships is actually one point that you highlighted, Director Hansen, is I think there's a number of us that are trying to identify this missing middle, but also before you get to the middle, we all know there's a reality that there's people sleeping in tents on the streets. And we hear from our residents, and I think Councilmember Ellison, you highlighted it, no one here romanticizes that. No one sees that and thinks, oh, I want to keep that. Oh, I think that's the best and ideal outcome for a resident in my community, and I want to keep it that way. I think we all work to find ways in which we can make sure that that is not a reality for anyone in our communities, in our ward, in our city. But that is the reality in which we're dealing with. And I think where the Navigation Center really was pivotal is it took people from the streets, from a tent, and placed them, while, yes, I'm hearing you all's experiences, was it the most ideal, conditions? I'm hearing that, but it beats being outside in a tent in negative degree weather. And I will name in the recent weeks, and I recall reading a report to it, and you mentioned the polar vortex, and the at least benefit of the Navigation Center was it was heated, it was insulated. Some of the reports that we're seeing, and many of the folks who are sleeping in tents and living outdoors, especially in the winter, and dealing with frostbite and losing limbs due to frostbite and hypothermia, and dealing with lifelong disabilities because of that. That is not okay. So the idea to be able to take someone from a tent into even a temporary insulated shelter, to then be able to say, okay, how do we then walk you into a next transitional place, if it's a Vivo, and then get you to a place where we can get you connected to partners. And like you said, all right, move towards that housing first model. I think everyone agrees housing first is the ideal choice. We want people to experience permanent housing and be able to be connected to the resources that they need to be able to maintain that and live fulfilling quality lives. But I think there is not only before you get to the middle, it's how do you get people not having to even be intense into even a transitional dignified space. And we recognize our shelter spaces are at capacity, and the navigation center offer at least an intermediate hub that offer a space where people can have a shower. And I know I speak with council members, Councilmember Chavez, Councilmember Osmond, when we went to encampments and visited, and we heard the frustrations from constituents about the troubles of even getting bathrooms to existing encampments that spring up, let alone showers out there. We've had constituents who come out and themselves have had to build showers and bathrooms to serve people who are living in encampments. These are the things that we're trying to figure out. How do we actually build a standardized and quality system so that we don't have to keep dealing with these makeshift conditions that comes with encampments that no one is happy about. But at least with the navigation center, okay, we knew this was, at least there was some oversight around it. It was funded. There was services that were provided. There did seem to be a coordinated approach. We have nothing, right? It feels like a free-for-all, and you evict one eviction and it moves down one block, and we're all in the same dynamic. And yes, we are all working on a variety of solutions, and we are trying to piecemeal something. And the piecemealing, it's not leading to a coordinated approach. And you highlighted that, like we're not aligned in the best way that we can be, and that's just not indicative of us. That's a nationwide problem when it has come to homelessness. So I think that is where I think a number of us are trying to figure out before we get to the end goal. If you could put this on the city's website of like mapping someone through the journey of when they're in a tent, and we would love to see them be able to own a key to their own home. What does it look like to go from that tent into what's this first space? And then what is the next space? We can't communicate that. And I think this is why we brought these measures, this directive forward to say that's where we're trying to figure out. Of course, with other partners, with other subject matter experts, but it's worth the exploration. It's worth trying to figure out how.
Council President Payne.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. I actually just, while Councilmember Ellison was making his remarks, I actually just followed through on the thought exercise. The math is here. $4.5 million was 68 successful exits. That's $66,000 per successful exit. Would agree, maybe writing a $66,000 check may have been more successful.
Changed their whole life.
Right? And then our most recent PIT number for unsheltered homelessness from 2024, that looks like they haven't compiled 2025 yet. I mean, that probably wrapped up only a couple weeks ago. 496, that it gets us to $32.8 million. I mean, that's $32.8 million of what is told to us is maybe one of the most inefficient, in the, least cost-effective methods per exit. That doesn't sound like actually a bank-breaking, dollar figure to me. If we talked to our community and said we're going to raise the levy by $33 million, that would probably make some people's eyes pop out a little bit. But if we said, and we've solved homelessness as a result of that, it's a different conversation. So I think there's definitely some responsible conversations around partnering with the county, making sure that we have service providers and a plan. But I mean, that's kind of the ceiling in some regards. I'm sure that it's fuzzy math a little bit. It doesn't translate because the 68 doesn't account for the folks that were not successful and how much is it going to cost to be successful for the folks that weren't successful. But it's just, I feel like we overcomplicate this conversation sometimes, because if we can just have the political will to get to $33 million, that seems to me like that would be something that is achievable, and then move on from there from the people who maybe would be more complex than would fit within that budget. But it's just to say it's not this infinite, unsolvable problem in that way.
Chair Chavez, Council President Payne, the middle part that I was speaking of is this folks that are in the congregate encampments. The county system is very good at getting people who are who have housing instability into shelter. It's that last piece that that percentage points of folks that are finding there, and on its face, like a year and a half ago, I'd been like, just give them the money and move them on. But what I've learned in the last year is the complexities of the folks that are in the encampments, and by just getting, I don't know if what I'm trying to get to is I'm not sure if that solves the problem, because they're folks that are, struggling with addiction or have mental health issues or other factors that are bringing them to these encampments. And I don't know if just putting money in their pocket puts them there. I'm feeling real nervous right now because this is not anywhere close to my expertise, just what I have learned over the last year. So I feel like I learned something in my 5th grade class and I'm telling my dad what I learned. And so I'd like to say that I think there's more complexity to that, to Councilmember Ellison's idea of just cutting somebody a check.
Well, to be clear, I'm not suggesting we're cutting checks. I'm suggesting at $33 million, what kind of facility could be built, what kind of services could we deliver in a way that would be more efficient than, the kind of 2-month version of the standing up of that program.
And Chair Chavez, Council President Payne, I absolutely agree with the long term. Like that is, we get the best return on our investment when we are looking at long-term facilities, and we are putting tens of millions of dollars. As you know, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund's at $18 million a year right now, and hopefully that holds. We've got money for people to buy houses, down payment assistance, all of those things that get them in there. It's that first, I like how you said, what's their first space? I think that's what we're trying to solve. I think the city is really in a strong position to get to those long-term solutions. We're just looking at that folks that are in these congregate encampments that seem to move around. I agree with you. They move around all over. They just go up and down the blocks. And what do we do to get that first space so that they're prepared for the long term? And that's where we absolutely have that system locked down with the county and the state and the housing community, the developers, both for-profit and nonprofit, and the city has been very fortunate to invest in that at a high level, and so that could help us solve. I mean, I think that's the long term. We want everybody in housing. We want to give them a key. That system is really strong. It's that middle, get them from an encampment to it, and I just don't know what it is yet. So I agree.
Thank you. I kind of just want to ground us on the current situation that we are in Minneapolis. There is just not enough shelter capacity to move everybody that is sleeping outdoor in Minneapolis on any given night indoors and say they now have a place to sleep at night. Mm-hmm. I think that the Star Tribune recently wrote an article about that. I want the public to read that article. It talks about shelter capacity, which is not good in the city and in the county. And I think that is an important conversation to have, because I feel like as a city, one of the reasons we are bringing forward these legislative directives of trying to study, analyze, hear feedback on different proposals, things that have worked in the past, things that might work in the future, is because there are so many people sleeping outside right now. This is disproportionately impacting folks in Ward 9, the area I represent. Mm-hmm. It is disproportionately impacting folks in Ward 6, in Councilmember Allison's ward. And what we are trying to do here today is say, yes, it is great that we're building more affordable housing in our city. That is amazing, great work that needs to happen. It supports current residents trying to move into affordable housing units. And there needs to be a specific focus on folks that are currently sleeping outside. Mm-hmm. What is our current focus on the individual person that is currently sleeping outside? Because an affordable housing unit it's just not going to be enough. Mm-hmm. There needs to be that affordable housing unit, perhaps with supportive services, with those wraparound services to help address mental health, addiction, job opportunities, you name it. But it's clear that that is not going to be enough. So we want to attempt to work on many different strategies to address this issue. And the reason we brought this forward was to see, okay, how did the former navigation center get established? You're presenting this today because we
now
gave
you
you
got
the
it.
direction. So I did want to make that clear. And what it would look like to do one in the future if we want to pursue that option. But like folks in my community were the ones that talked to me about this, which is why we brought this forward.
Sure.
But there's conversations in the community right now of like, okay, we don't have to reinvent necessarily the wheel of the same navigation center that was established a couple years ago. What does it look like to have a smaller site work with trusted partners to address this issue? And it doesn't have to be the same thing. I think for us, what we're looking for is, I think there's an opportunity to work directly with individuals on the ground doing this work, hear from their advice, the folks that unhoused individuals trust, and figure out ways to partner as a city to establish something different. It could be similar, it could not be. It can allow us to learn from previous things that we did. But to be fair, like, if we were going to compare the success of this, I think the numbers show that this has been more successful than a variety of programs that we probably fund. And we can look at the data. If you're telling me a specific percentage of people were permanently housed, we should look at other programs that we help fund and see how many people are housed through their programs. And I think that while there have been many things that, didn't go that well, there are many things that went well. And we should figure out what went well, how do we replicate that, whether it's through a media navigation center, a navigation hub, a navigation center in general, or through a different program. How do we replicate some of those things into something different that is going to address this issue? Because I'll go back to my comment at the beginning, is there is just not enough shelter capacity for every single person that is sleeping outside in Minneapolis today to move indoors. That just doesn't exist. So there needs to be alternatives, there needs to be different approaches, and I think that this is us trying to say, let's try something new, because we know that just building more affordable housing, while it is very important, and I believe every single council member supports that, and we have by voting for those, for affordable housing in our city, we need to do more. And there needs to be new strategies, and I think this is something that we're trying to look at. But it's clear that we need to try many other things. So I just kind of wanted to make those comments today. Councilmember Ellison.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I'll say I'm always a fan of cash infusions. I think that we should try that more often. Be a little less paternalistic in how we govern, and figure out how people can make their own decisions. But I agree that it's not just it's not a fix for every solution. I want to say that in its context, this is my opinion. In its context, the Navigation Center was good. We learned a lot about encampments in that time. We learned a lot about what people were going through in that time. And while we learned all of that, I don't know that we've put all those learnings to use. I don't know that we've necessarily been in the best position to build on those learnings at a systemic level. I think that what we've got, and this is more kind of what I'm speaking to, is we've got a problem that we're not solving. We've got, and this is my opinion. I don't think it's controversial to say this, but we've got a mayor and an admin that are engaged in strategies that council don't agree with. We hear from community members and service providers that evictions don't lead to people being housed, right? But what I'm saying is that if in the way that we're sort of trucking along here, I'm not that hopeful that we won't just recreate not only the good of the old Navigation Center, but also the bad of the old Navigation Center. And I'm wondering how we can't engage in a process that helps us not do that other thing. And while we were, and not to always be like relitigating government structure, but I do think that we're in a position where power's a little bit more concentrated. And so I think we as a city, this is my opinion, nobody has to share it, I do think that we as an enterprise are a lot less creative because we can't spread policymaker brain power thin like we used to, right? We can't like sort of spread folks out and say, okay, you're focused on that, you're focused on that, you're focused on that. In a way that I feel like we used to be able to do, council members sort of would develop their niche, and then we could all sort of trust that okay, so-and-so knows what they're talking about at least a little bit. And so that's sort of my caution. It's not to say that the presentation's bad. It's not to say that we shouldn't create new strategies. It's just to say that, I'm worried when I see how we're trucking along. Like I said, that we wouldn't only recreate sort of the positive benefits of the Navigation Center, but that we would also create the negatives. Which, what would be the point of that, right? Like all that history, and I don't know that we've necessarily taken full advantage of it. And just to say, when I went down to the Wall of Forgotten Natives, it was wouldn't have to go too much into the history of that, but like I had people that I grew up with that were there. I had people who I knew who went to high school with my younger brother who were there, who I thought of as little kids, and they were there struggling. We had a community member who lost their son there in a very public way. And so, I think one of the things that I get frustrated about, not with this conversation, but just in general, is how did we go from that to just either recreating it or doing evictions? It feels like we just really squandered a moment to really learn from that decision. And I want to say that money, whether it's that $66,000 per or $30,000 per, right, depending on how you break down, that per person, that wasn't over the course of a year. It was 5 months.
9.
3, 9. I know we pushed the
it's in the report.
Yeah, thing back, but it wasn't over the course of a full year is what I'm saying. And so again, it's not necessarily the sticker price, the cost that gets me concerned.
Yeah.
Although it's a reality, we have to think about cost. It's the, did we improve people's lives with what it costs? And in my opinion, the answer is, zooming out, the answer is we could have done better. And while I'm not an expert either, I do question whether, giving somebody a $10,000 check versus spending $60,000 on them in this sort of more paternalistic way, I do sort of question which one is better in terms of that person's ability to go and pick themselves back up. But we all know that if we wrote checks that way, none of us would get reelected. So there's that. But I do think that we should be brave enough to sort of push the envelope. So I don't know what it takes us to get from point A to point B on a really creative solution. Like I said, I do think as an institution, we are overall less creative. And I would love to see us reverse that and be a more creative institution again. But I think it's going to require a level of collaboration that, to my mind, we don't have a lot of models for. And I guess I'll just sort of leave it at that observation. But I do hope that we can bridge that, because I think that people deserve it.
Awesome, thank you. And Director Hansen, thanks so much for doing this presentation today. I think for us,
I'm gonna
it's
get a chair next time.
Yes, I think to Councilmember Ellison's point, we should figure out how that collaboration or those conversations or work groups or, that is an important conversation to have on this. So thanks for the presentation, very helpful. All right, so seeing no further questions, I'll direct the clerk to receive and file that report. And our final item is receiving and filing a national landscape analysis on other cities' drug overdose prevention strategies. Here to present on this item is Ashley from the Policy and Research team. Thanks so much for your patience, everyone.
Thank you. Sorry. Good afternoon, Chair Chavez and members of the committee. My name is Ashley Juk from the City Auditor's Policy and Research Division. I'm here to present on an overdose prevention landscape analysis. First, legislative background. On July 10th, this committee directed Policy and Research to complete a national landscape analysis of other cities' drug prevention strategies, including expanding access to fentanyl test strips and naloxone, as well as overdose response teams. We were also directed to identify example cities, implementation strategies, resources, assessments, impact measurements, and good practices. Before we go through the presentation, it is important that everyone has a common understanding of the following terms. Naloxone is a medication that rapidly reverses an opioid overdose. Narcan is the most common name brand of naloxone. Buprenorphine is a medication to treat opioid use disorder. Like methadone, it can reduce cravings and withdrawal symptoms in a person with opioid use disorder. Harm reduction vending machines is a vending machine which provides naloxone as well as a variety of harm reduction supplies. These can include safer injection supplies, safer sex supplies, personal hygiene products, drug disposal bags, syringes, sharps, even gun locks. Overdose response teams are teams who engage either on scene with an overdose survivor or can also engage survivors in the days following an overdose to connect them with a variety of services and strategies to reduce their risk for future overdose. Starting with some overdose background information, the ongoing opioid crisis is an urgent public health challenge in the United States. According to preliminary data in Minnesota in 2023, there were 1,274 drug overdose deaths, about 70 which percent involved synthetic opioids like fentanyl. This marks an 8% decrease in drug overdose deaths from 2022 and is reflective of national trends. While overall drug overdose death rates have decreased, opioid death rates continue to rise. In Minneapolis in 2023, there were 272 opioid-related deaths. Within the broader opioid crisis, there are additional racial disparities. In 2021, American Indian Minnesotans were 10 times as likely to die from a drug overdose than white Minnesotans. Black Minnesotans were more than 3 times as likely to die from a drug overdose than white Minnesotans. Hennepin County disparities for the African American, American Indian, and Hispanic populations continue to increase. According to the Minnesota Department of Health, in Minnesota, the health inequities experienced by communities of color as a result of determinants of health and systemic racism results in these overdose death disparities for communities of color. Adding to that, studies have determined that a racial disparity gap also exists in naloxone training, access, and use. Increasing the availability and accessibility to medication-assisted treatment, especially buprenorphine and naloxone, is essential to reduce overdose deaths. Harm reduction vending machines increase the accessibility of harm reduction products, including naloxone. Post-overdose response teams can identify people who are at higher risk of fatal overdose and link them to care, including, again, to naloxone and buprenorphine. They also often address an individual's complex needs beyond drug use. It should be noted that Minneapolis currently has a naloxone vending machine pilot program, and all paramedics can administer buprenorphine. Next, we'll take a look at some harm reduction vending machine highlights from the report. Naloxone and harm reduction vending machines have both advantages and disadvantages. Advantages can include 24/7 availability, low barrier access, and increased privacy and anonymity. Machines don't make judgments, nor do they discriminate. This can attract people who use drugs who may not otherwise access services for a variety of reasons, including distrust of healthcare services or government systems. Disadvantages include the initial machine cost as well as ongoing costs to check and stock them, as well as potentially losing a touch point to build a relationship with someone, which could lead to further treatment services in the future. These disadvantages can be mitigated by membership-based programs, which require anonymous sign-up and renewals, or turning machines off during open hours if the host site of the machine offers similar supplies. While community naloxone saturation is an evidence-based strategy to reduce overdose deaths, there is still some debate among the harm reduction practitioners that I spoke with about whether or not it was harm reduction vending machines are the most cost-effective and efficient strategy compared to other naloxone distribution options. There is significant variation. Sorry. I think my cough medicine is throwing my brain off just a little bit today. There is significant variation across harm reduction vending machine program parameters around the country. Supplies provided vary greatly, from some machines only providing naloxone to others providing much broader harm reduction supplies. Supplies provided are impacted by numerous factors, including program priorities, funding availability, size of the machine, and legality. For example, xylazine test strips are still considered drug paraphernalia in a number of states, and syringe distribution is also often limited by local codes. Machine functions and capabilities also vary. Options include machines that can be placed outdoors or ones that must be placed indoors. Machines without temperature control, for example, are typically placed indoors. Machines with information tracking software can track supply utilization associated to individual codes, as well as provide virtual supply inventory updates. This hard data can help evaluate the program's effectiveness and also build community support. Machine cost varies greatly as well, depending on the capabilities. Refurbished machines can be as low as $2,500, whereas higher-end machines with more functionality can be between $8,000 to $15,000. Most programs interviewed for this report do also get their naloxone free from their state health department, which greatly impacts the associated costs for their program. And machines that track data also have an ongoing monthly cost of around $100 a month. Accessing machine supplies, program models for how participants access the machines, again, varies greatly. Some machines accessed are very low barrier. You just go up and push the button to get the supply you want. Other programs, as I mentioned, utilize a membership model, which requires anonymous sign-up before participants receive their own unique code and/or a card sometimes to access supplies from the machine. Frequency of required participant code renewal also varies. Supply limitations. Some machines are set to limit the number or frequency of supplies dispensed per unique code within a certain time frame. Machines that don't utilize codes can also sometimes be set to limit supplies, but most don't. As far as location of the machines, there are various processes through which programs have determined vending machine locations. They frequently choose locations based on criteria including higher overdose rates and drug use, limited healthcare access, as well as overall geographic accessibility. Host sites are often chosen based on willingness, proven commitment, and where there is already additional harm reduction resources. Many people interviewed for this report discussed the importance of placing vending machines in or close to jails, prisons, detention centers, due to the increased risk of overdose post-release. This, I'm not going to linger on this too long. This is the comparison chart of the harm reduction vending machine programs reviewed in this report, including Minneapolis there is at the bottom. Feel free to take a closer look at this. It's also in the report, as well as details on all of the programs. I am going to move on to overdose response team highlights. Overall, overdose response team parameters. The team purpose, overdose response teams vary in many ways, but generally share the common goals, including immediate overdose response, general outreach, as well as follow-up care and connection to future treatment options. Many teams cover all of these services, but some municipalities have teams focused on one area of service or response, and some of the teams were purposely created to free up other EMS services from responding and staying on scene for overdose calls. Many teams also end up filling the gaps between other service providers, connecting people to support services and helping them far beyond overdose prevention needs, such as finding housing, jobs, healthcare, getting IDs, figuring out insurance. This recognizes the reality that people who use drugs cannot often successfully address substance use disorder without having their basic needs like food, clothing, shelter, and healthcare met. It is extremely difficult for people who are unsheltered to make positive changes, including starting and staying on medication while facing the stress, uncertainty, and insecurity of not knowing where they will be sleeping that evening. Team composition. Some teams exist in fire departments, some in health departments, and some in nonprofit emergency response services. Teams tend to be multidisciplinary, but generally include an emergency healthcare responder, such as an EMT or paramedic, and often include a type of peer support specialist, someone with lived experience. Including a peer support specialist is considered good practice by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration and was strongly recommended by several of the teams that we spoke with. Team development, team deployment. Most teams deploy to suspected overdose incidents, though some focus more on outreach and or post-overdose follow-up care. Most are dispatched with other standard EMS response units, such as police, fire, ambulance, or are from the fire department themselves. Moving on to emphasis of non-law enforcement team identity. Despite frequently relying on law enforcement data systems, many teams take steps to emphasize to their patients that they are with the fire or health departments and specifically not with law enforcement. They also generally try to clear police from the scene as quickly as possible because many of their patients, especially people who are unhoused, have negative associations or have had negative experiences with law enforcement. Patient-driven course of action. For almost all of the programs interviewed for this report, patients have full control of the outcomes of the team's response. On the scene, if they are medically stable, patients can decide whether or not to be taken to the hospital or any other treatment facility. They can always simply choose to walk away. And they also determine whether or not they want to start buprenorphine or any other treatment option. Pre-hospital buprenorphine administration. Most of the teams interviewed for this report can administer pre-hospital buprenorphine, either a unique ability to their team or as part of a broader EMS capability at their municipality. Most of them secured the ability to administer buprenorphine within the last year or two and described it as a game changer because it allows people to think clearly without experiencing the cravings or ongoing withdrawal symptoms. Stigma and internal cultural leaders. Several teams discussed the stigma around people who use drugs, even from medical and social service providers. Members of these teams are often specially trained in opioid use disorder, harm reduction strategies, and stigma reduction, and can serve as both external and internal cultural leaders to prompt positive shifts in the department culture. And finally, last but not least, costs and funding. The majority of the costs associated with these teams are for staffing, whether that is for regularly staffed or voluntarily overtime staff positions. A lot of funding for these teams has included opioid settlement funding. And again, most teams also get their naloxone from their state health department for free. While overdose response team vary in team composition and the services they provide, they all share the goal of reducing overdose deaths in their communities. Again, some focus on increased pre-hospital buprenorphine administration, and others serve broader post-overdose follow-up care in connection to further treatment options. These are all the communities interviewed for this report. Detailed descriptions of all of those teams can be found in the full report. Moving on to additional programs and strategies, just highlighting a few things that came up when I was talking to these teams around the country. Additional program examples include the telehealth in San Francisco, California, which provides a real-time connection with a doctor over the phone who can write someone a buprenorphine prescription or connect them to a methadone clinic for intake. The telehealth line is available 16 hours a day from 8 a.m. to midnight. Safe Spot in Boston, Massachusetts is a virtual spotting hotline for people who use drugs. People can call into the hotline and connect to someone who stays on the line as the person uses. If the person becomes unresponsive at any point during the call, the hotline can send emergency response to their location. Additional examples including increased drug testing options, educational campaigns, an internal prevention collective, a drug users empowerment group, and harm reduction training for people who supply drugs can also be found in the full report. Now for some highlighted overdose prevention work in the Twin Cities. While not requested in the directive, I wanted to include some current overdose prevention work occurring in Minneapolis. This is by no means an exhaustive review of programs or organizations, but highlighted work being done here, which is relevant to the example cities' work throughout the report. The city of Minneapolis as mentioned already, has a Narcan vending machine pilot program, which started in July of 2024. The city is also launching a mobile medical unit early this year and is working with mHealth Fairview's University of Minnesota Medical Center to offer free rapid access to buprenorphine in the First Step pilot program. In Minneapolis, EMS services are provided by Hennepin Healthcare Hennepin Healthcare Emergency Medical Services, a nonprofit healthcare system separate from the county. For the last 2 years, all paramedics have been able to administer buprenorphine to patients in opioid withdrawal, either caused by Narcan or the cessation of opioid use. They're also in the process of launching a team who will be able to dispense a small bridge supply of buprenorphine to patients in the field who have received their first dose of buprenorphine until they can meet with a physician within a few days to continue that. These programs, as well as additional overdose prevention work and naloxone distribution by the City of Minneapolis, Hennepin County, the Steve Rumler Hope Network, and Naloxone Access Now are all discussed in much more detail in the report. That does conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions about anything that I talked about now or that you hopefully all read about in the report.
Thanks so much for the presentation. We really appreciate it. I'll first pass it on to Council President Payne and then Vice Chair Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chavez, and thank you so much for this report. It is really good, and it's really good because it has very specific actions that feel like they're tangible and steps that we can take right now today, obviously through a process. But I got a couple questions. Number one, we got a nice printout from Howie in the chamber. He's asking for us to extend our pilot for the vending machine to the north side, but it was really interesting to see the different products that were available in the vending machine, and I'm wondering, you'd mentioned some of the state statute barriers, you'd mentioned some of just kind of like the environmental barriers. Do you see any other barriers beyond that and just our ability to allocate resources in terms of being able to do vending machine expansion?
I can't say that I looked in specifically to any Minnesota, again, because it was more of a national landscape that I was looking at. I do know that xylazine test strips are legal in Minnesota, as are obviously fentanyl test strips now. I can't see barriers. Funding, I mean, it's a primary one. The Minnesota portal for Narcan has been kind of frozen since July of this year. I did not have the capacity within this report to dig deeper into why or how or what that is. So funding for naloxone is definitely, like I said, pretty much every single person, whether a team or a vending machine I talked to in this report, was all getting their naloxone covered by their state, presumably primarily through opioid settlement funding. I didn't look at all of their states, but they mentioned numerous ones. So I think it's just funding, and then, doing the due diligence of finding supportive locations and consistently being able to, it needs to be there. If it's expected to be there in naloxone as well as any other supply, it needs to consistently be there to be effective.
Awesome. And then the other thing that just feels very tangible is the overdose response team. And I was curious, as you looked at the landscape, was it more of a specialist overdose response team, or did you see it more more examples of, fire or EMS having, within their current capacity, having folks that are detailed to be in that role? Because we're still in the very early stages, for instance, of moving behavioral crisis response under fire, which is more of an administrative thing than an operational thing, but there's a long-term vision to be able to have more types of responses, and I see this as a very tangible response. So kind of like simplifying that question, were these more specialist response teams, or what did you see it as a more common practice to expand the role of EMS or fire or other first responders?
They were specialized teams, often within EMS or EMT, and by that I mean, so St. Paul, they just trained, I think, I'd have to double check the report, but I think it's 6 people within their EMT who, within their fire department, who are their EMS services for St. Paul, to administer buprenorphine specifically, versus in Minneapolis, like I said, it's all paramedics, but around the country, the teams, the feeling I got from them was that they were focusing on specialized teams because EMS people who have much more in-depth training on buprenorphine, harm reduction, overdose response, connection to services. If you're living in that world all the time, you are more likely to understand the complexities and be able to offer the right words at the right time to convey all of their options in a responsive way, or to get a positive response from those interactions. And so they did tend to have focused teams, even if they lived inside of an EMT or a paramedic or a health department. That being said, like I said, some of the purposes of the teams was also to take pressure off of other EMS services, so that when someone would call in with a potential overdose, or even someone sleeping in public, it wasn't always a police and a full ambulance heading there and spending that time there, when there potentially were other urgent situations that would better use their talents versus this team of specialized folks. So I will say that, yes, overall it was generally specialized folks, but they sometimes still lived within the general EMT or paramedic program within a city.
And then my last question, because we see this actually very commonly with BCR, where they'll successfully de-escalate a situation, and then there's not exactly a great next step for that individual in terms of treatment. And I think I read in the report that was a similar challenge here for some of these overdose prevention teams, that even when you are successfully able to reverse that overdose, get people stabilized, especially with buprenorphine, because we learned that Narcan kind of puts people instantly into withdrawal, and that's actually the risk for fatal overdose often when they get resuscitated. What's our landscape look like in terms of that next step for treatment, even if you were to successfully reverse that overdose?
I didn't evaluate the landscape in the cities thoroughly, but looking around, like everything comes down to resources, beds that are available, and by that I mean both in shelters, so that if someone is in buprenorphine, they are more likely to attend, a meeting the next day with a social worker or something if they are not on the street that night. Beds in methadone clinics, beds in overdose withdrawal management centers. So that was one of the biggest resources. If someone's willing to go somewhere, there has to be somewhere to take them. I also know, I don't know what any of the codes are in Minneapolis, and I think it was St. Paul that right now they their people can only take you to a hospital, and they're trying to expand that to take them to like their Clinic 555 or other treatment centers. So they're trying to like look at what those codes are to like not require someone going to a hospital, because someone will often be like, well, I'm not going to a hospital. And then if the only other option is to walk away, then they walk away. And so I would want to look at some of those things within our city as well to know what the options are.
That's really helpful context. Thank you so much for this report.
Vice Chair Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Chavez. First, I just want to say thank you for coming through with this pretty extensive report. And just also thank you to the policy and research team. You all stay producing, just literally like round of applause to you all. Like, I am always just impressed with the level of thoughtfulness and thoroughness that you all pour into the research that you produce for the legislative body. And you all have just become such a critical part in us developing our work and, of course, serving our residents. And this is just clearly a reflection of that, and us really trying to be responsive to what is a very important issue that's impacting many of our residents. So I just wanted to say thank you to PAR, and thank you specifically for producing this report. I also wanted to encourage colleagues to, you reference the First Step program as one of the Twin Cities initiatives. And this committee actually had the opportunity to work with the Public Health Department last year in organizing site visits to see that. So if any colleagues that did not have the opportunity to do that, be it on this committee or not on this committee, but have an interest, we're always more than happy to connect you with our public health leadership to figure out how to coordinate that visit. But it was extremely informative, and I really hope maybe there's another avenue for us to figure out how to support that, because that's also still in pilot phase, I believe. So really looking at that is something that not only should be, I think, supported beyond a pilot phase, but how are we able to get other healthcare systems to embrace what they're doing. So wanted to highlight that piece, and was glad to see that it was referenced because they've come before this committee and talk about that work. And then also to pitch to committee members and the public that we're actually going to have the Public Health Department for the city come and give a presentation on their opioid, let me make sure I say that right, their opioid strategic plan implementation update on March 19th. So Chair Chavez and I brought forward a legislative directive last year, and I believe also, Council President Payne, asking basically the Frye administration for what is their comprehensive plan in response to a lot of the things that you lay out in this report of, again, we recognize this has been an ongoing crisis, and many of our residents wants to know how are we approaching this with a comprehensive focus and with coordination with other government agencies and partners to really be effective in our approach. So as a response to that legislative directive, the administration has formed a strategic plan, and they're going to give their next update on March 19th at 1:30 to this committee. And I'm sure many of the components that you reference will be also integrated and built upon in a much broader way. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure I pitched that too, and really excited to finally receive that. So just wanted to highlight that, and that's all.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the presentation. I think there was a lot that we were able to learn. I think the refurbished machines component was really interesting, saying would love to have a conversation now with the health department to see if that's maybe an approach we could take in the city, if that would mean having more vending machines in Minneapolis. So I think that's something that was very interesting. I think the conversations about having these vending machines near jails, prisons, detention centers, that's something that was a good thing to learn from here, something I want to engage the health department as well on. And then seeing what like overdose response teams could look like is something that is really interesting. So I just want to thank you for the presentation. Thank PAR, all of you, for the work that you all did on this. We'll definitely be following up. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, colleagues, seeing no further questions or comments, I will direct the clerk to receive and file that report. And seeing no further business before us, I will declare this meeting adjourned.
Tis the season. Save it for the end.
Oh, really? Oh.
So we're trying to